Welcome back, everyone, to a new episode of the Batflip Podcast. My name is Damon here with my co-host, Matt. David is off this week, so just going to be Matt and I. We got a bunch of Cardinals news, a president of baseball operations stepping down, the last couple manager hired or have been hired, and the World Series breakdown that has so far been through 2 games. Game 3 is on as we're recording this on Tuesday. But how are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing pretty good. I had a great day yesterday because my college football team that I'm obsessed with fired their coach, which was a long time coming. But yeah, I've been doing good. Today, just been hanging out, watching the World Series as we record, and enjoying that. The Phillies are up 2-0 right now, but we'll talk a little bit more about the World Series here in a little bit later. But yeah, everything's going good. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. Had a pretty decent weekend as well. Just hanging out, watched a lot of football, watched the World Series, and then watched Ross Chastain absolutely just go nuclear and hold it wide open while grabbing fifth gear against the wall during the NASCAR race on Sunday, which was insane. So that was pretty fun. But you had a pretty good day today as well with the NFL trade deadline, getting Dolphins getting Bradley Chubb. It's a pretty
Yeah,
big
Jeff
deal.
Wilson too.
Yeah, well, that's not as big of a deal,
Not as
but
big as deal as Bradley Chubb, but
Bradley
still
Chubb, yeah.
still nice, both
Yeah.
of them. But yeah,
But we'll go ahead and stick to baseball. We'll jump in with the bunch of Cardinals news that happened this past week. So first off, we'll go ahead and start with Adam Wainwright. Has announced that he will actually be returning for 2023 and announcing that this will be his final season. He signed a 1-year, $17.5 million deal. $10 million of that is deferred, and there is some incentives based on how many starts he gets, but big add back to that Cardinals rotation.
yeah, definitely. Adam Wainwright, he did. I don't think he had quite the year he had in 2021, but a lot of that was luck based. He actually had the exact same FIP as he did in 2021, which is pretty impressive. But he's kind of this guy who, at this stage, is still a good pitcher. That he's going to run an upper mid to upper threes ERA typically at this stage. But he's still been very very solid the last couple years. He is going to be age 41 next year, so definitely an ageless wonder. But I mean, the terms on this deal, what were 17.5 million? It might be a little bit high.
Well, 10
I don't
million of
know.
it's deferred as well. So
Yeah, I guess the 7.5 for next year would be perfectly fine for a 41-year-old pitcher with his resume and his recent history. But 17.5 in total, eventually deferring it even is a little high, I think, for a 41-year-old pitcher coming off a 371 ERA season. But he still threw almost 200 innings. He's been durable the last couple years, and I mean, he means a lot to St. Louis. And I'm honestly kind of surprised he's not retiring with Molina and Pujols, but uh, he's going to be a big piece for them next year, and he's definitely going to be in that rotation day one. So we'll see what he's able to do at age 41. It's been impressive to watch him the last couple years, continue to pitch at a high level.
yeah, I wonder how much him coming back has to do with him not being able to, or him not pitching this postseason. Because he pretty much said after that had left a sour taste in his mouth, and I wonder if he was able to pitch in that series and had that one final go there, if he might have stepped out with the other two. But getting him back into that rotation, at least, he's a guy, like you said, he's durable. He means a lot to that clubhouse, to this team. He's a solid innings eater, will get you close to 200 innings, and pretty much what you're going to get. You're going to get that mid 3 to high 3 ERA, and he's just going to be an overall solid pitcher. But, staying with their news, they did also announce that hitting coach Jeff Albert will not be returning, as long with pitching coach Mike Maddox will also not be returning. And then probably the biggest news of it all, Nolan Arenado decided to opt into the rest of his 5-year, $144 million deal.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised by the pitching coach and the hitting coach not coming back. They both, at least Mike Maddox for sure has a really good reputation. But I mean, you know, it's kind of I don't know. It's kind of surprising. I mean, St. Louis, they had a very good offensive team this year for the most part. Um, they were fourth in offense. Based on Fangraphs numbers, they were fifth in runs scored on the season. They had good approach at the plate. They were pretty good in the strikeout department, and they walked a pretty decent amount. Um, I don't really understand. I mean, and it might also been a mutual too. I don't fully understand that. And then on the pitching side, where you know, I, I just, I mean, I'm sure it's mutual in some ways, but I don't understand wanting to move on for Mike Maddox. I mean, part of St. Louis's problem was their pitching staff, but I mean, just talent wise, I just don't think they have talent there. Like, it's more on the front office to me than it is on pitching coach and pitching development at the major league level for them. So, um, I'm sure that they've got guys in mind that they probably want to go after that are different. But I don't really know. It's kind of sometimes when it comes to baseball and when it comes to any professional sport, it's really difficult to tell if assistants, like hitting coach, pitching coach, or if you talk about other sports like coordinators or whatever, like it's really difficult to tell what's if it's their fault or if it's the overall talent level from the front office, or they don't see eye to eye. It's just hard to tell. So they definitely are going to have new voices. And then on the Nolan Arenado thing, I was really surprised that he opted into this contract. He had like an insane year this year. That was I mean, it was an MVP level season. He actually finished point 0.1 WAR behind. Being the best player in the National League behind Manny Machado when it comes to WAR. Obviously, fantastic defensive player. Sometimes when your defense is a carrying statistic, that can be a little bit less um, lucrative on the free agent market just because it doesn't age as well. But his offense, he had the best offensive season of his career this year, a 151 WRC plus. His strikeout rate was only 11%. Walked a lot more than he has most of his career. He was very, very, very good this year at the plate, and you know 5 years, 144. I feel like he probably could have beaten that on the free agent market, but he is going to be 32 next year, so I'm sure some teams might have had a little bit of hesitation on 5 years, or on a huge contract. But I definitely feel like he could have beaten that. He just probably just likes and then St. Louis and likes being a Cardinal, so probably has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it does. He pretty much said that St. Louis, when he got traded, there was one of the places that he had a no trade clause when he got traded, and he picked to go to St. Louis. He said that he's felt at home with that team, and I mean, if you look at it, it's an average of about $29 million a year. He probably could have got a couple more $1 million per year on the free agent market and maybe a couple extra years, but I wouldn't be surprised. We've seen the Cardinals, take care of their guys. I wouldn't be surprised that if a couple years down the road, if they want to lock up Arenado to an extension, that will be too hard to do, and that he'll get probably right around the same value, maybe slightly less there. But I mean, it felt like I didn't know how much more he'd get on the free agent market. I felt like he might do a slightly bigger deal, but overall, I just think he wanted to stay in St. Louis, and I thought that was always the likely scenario. It is weird to have the hitting coach and the pitching coach after the success they had this year. And actually, their bullpen coach was another one that is not returning to the staff. They said he'll be reassigned somewhere within the organization. So that's really the bullpen and the pitching coach. That bullpen was really good this year as well. So having those three not really returning is a little weird, but it could also be Ollie Marmol wanting to put more of his imprint on the staff, because I feel a lot of those were carryovers from the Mike Schilt days. So maybe it's him wanting to bring his own people on. But it was a big week for the not Arizona Cardinals, the for the St. Louis Cardinals. But we'll go ahead and stay in that division and jump over to the Milwaukee Brewers, who had their president of baseball operations, David Stern, stepped down this week. Matt Arnold has been promoted to replace him, but David Stern has been a hot commodity around teams the last couple years, wanting to purge him over to their teams, as the Brewers usually lack the resources to put a gigantic chunk into the team. And it always been rumored that he'd go somewhere else, but it's pretty surprising to see him step down while he still has a year of control with the Brewers.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. I think that there's a couple things that this signifies. First thing is, I think he might have just been not super excited to be there. At this point, it is difficult with Milwaukee right now, resources they're working with. I think there was some frustration from just that organization in general, probably with ownership, but also with the players on the team with that trade at the deadline with trading away Hader. I know the team was really unhappy about that. It really upset their clubhouse, and I think that there's probably a lot of maybe a little animosity about that going around. But and then I don't know much about Matt Arnold. Obviously, promoting from within. There's not a ton there, but this is an interesting time for the Brewers because if you look at them, they could be maybe going into a rebuild soon. Christian Yelich is on a really, really big contract for not really doing all that well. Their best player right now is Willie Adames, who is really good, but he's kind of a power only shortstop. That's a good defensive shortstop. And I mean, other than that, they don't really have any stars. They just kind of got a bunch of decent players, and then their pitching staff with Corbin Burns, Dave Brandon Woodruff, Freddie Peralta are really, really good when they stay healthy for a full season. But um, it's the team that they don't have a lot of resources. Some of those guys are going to be coming up for extensions somewhat soon, like Willie Adames. He's going to be becoming more expensive in arbitration, and he's got 2 years of control. Actually, I think he might have signed a deal locked up through arbitration, but he's only got 2 years of control left. Some of their guys they've kind of mixed and matched, like Hunter Renfroe. Probably won't be around super, long term. He might even be a free agent. I don't even know honestly. Um, Looks like 2024 he's a free agent. So um, he's ARB eligible one more year, and he's probably going to get an ARB raise. So it's and then I think it's possible that they could maybe look to trade some major league pieces soon, and this might be signifying that they might be looking at a way to go into more of a rebuilding phase. Their farm system's pretty mediocre. Uh, I wouldn't be shocked if they started to go into a little bit of a rebuild and getting ahead of it a little bit more. So we'll see what happens there. It's going to be an interesting offseason for Milwaukee, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's already been just some slight rumblings that ever since this move kind of happened that maybe they would look into trading a guy like Woodruff, who I think has 2 years left of free or 2 or 3 years left of control. I think he's free agent in 2025. Um, there's been rumors that might be something that could happen. And you mentioned, some of the other people like Adamas and Renfro, if they were, potentially be flipped already as well. So it is kind of weird. It is in that weird phase where it kind of feels like they should rebuild, and this would be the off season to do it. As Arnold's taking over, because David Stearns probably wasn't going to initiate the rebuild, and it's been widely rumored that after his contract was up, he was going to be leaving anyways. I wouldn't be surprised to see a team try and figure something out to get him in there earlier than next season, or earlier than next off season, I should say. But it's going to be a really, really weird patch for the Brewers going forward in the next couple of years to see where they really take this direction of the team long term. Because, like you mentioned, they have some pieces on that team that can get them a good return. The farm system isn't that great. Right now would be a good time to kind of pounce on the value that those players still have and get you some good players in that farm system to help you move forward, since you can't run as high payroll as other teams.
Yeah, the one problem with that is that it's a situation where that division is still so winnable. It's hard to trade away pieces because I mean the Reds are still going to be bad next year. The Pirates are still going to be bad next year. The Cardinals are going to probably be about the same. And then you look at the Cubs and kind of who knows. They have a lot of holes to fill, but they theoretically could compete next year a little bit. But I mean, that division's still really bad, so it's hard to trade away from a roster that won 86 games when it's really a winnable division. So we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's jump over to the American League Central now, and we'll start with the Kansas City Royals. Just hired their manager, former Rays bench coach Matt Quattaro. He also worked in Cleveland with Terry Francona for a little while. It seems to be widely regarded, around the league as a guy who connects to younger players, and he's going to be the new guy ushering in that young core in Kansas City.
Well, I don't. I know very very little about Matt Quattaro, but or Quattaro. I'm not exactly sure how to say his last name, but he I do think that the Royals are moving into a good direction here. They are really they're really wanting to move a little bit more into analytics and kind of a more of a Moneyball style new era type of front office. That's when they got rid of Dayton Moore and Mike Matheny. They're really old school guys, and I think that's something that really needed to happen for the Royals, just because of their payroll being so low and being a smaller market team, not being able to pay as much as other teams can. And I think this should be a pretty good move. I mean, he's got a good background at least. His pedigree's good. He's come from successful franchises under very very good managers. So and franchises that quite frankly are in very similar types of markets and how they have to be successful as what Kansas City is. Like Cleveland and Tampa Bay are very they're also small market teams. They're the ones that have been successful. So bringing some of that experience in should be good for them. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, I don't know too much about him. It's not like he has a super long history as a manager that we can go into, but I think that it's probably a good move from the Royals.
Yeah, these first time managers, it's pretty hard to get a lot of the background and kind of know exactly what their tendencies and stuff will be. But like you mentioned, he's come from two organizations that have had plenty of success recently with the Guardians and the Rays, and he's come from two managers who've had a really good career. Kevin Cash, I mean, he's consistently in the manager of the year running and is one of the best managers with the team in the Rays, who has the lack of talent there. And then you talk about Terry Francona, who is widely regarded as one of the best, if not the best manager in baseball. And he's been for 20 years or something like that. Like, he always finds a way to connect with the players. And Matt Quattaro has been with both of those guys. I think it's a great fit with the Royals. It'll be interesting to see what that process looks like moving forward with him, and what they, if they do transition to more of that kind of Moneyball style, because the Royals have been aggressive at times, but with this young core, they kind of need somebody that's going to help connect and get more to that analytical side. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he is able to do moving forward in that role. But staying with the Royals kind of theme, the White Sox hired the Royals bench coach, or former bench coach, Pedro Grifolo, as their new manager this past week, and it was actually the last manager spot that we had open so far.
Yeah, so I thought this was interesting. I don't know. It's another one that it's just kind of hard to tell how with a guy like Griffol. It's hard to tell with these first time managers, but I mean he he's coming from the old school part of the of the Royals organization. It feels like. I mean, he's somebody that was there with Matheny. I don't know. I don't know how he's going to a place that probably needs a little bit more of a little bit more analytically minded. He's going to a place he's replacing probably the most old school manager ever, and a guy who really had a hard time connecting with players. Um, I think the White Sox I feel like the White Sox either needed somebody, they needed some youth and energy there, and we'll see if this guy brings it. I definitely think that this was a move that I don't necessarily trust the White Sox to make the right move with their front office and management, but we'll see what happens here. So
Yeah, the problem that I have with this move is last week it was like right before the World Series started. It was rumored that Joe Espada, who is the Astros bench coach, was in line to take the White Sox job, and that it was just going to be announced after the World Series was over. Right? They didn't want it to be a distraction to the team or whatever at the time. And I believe that was on Thursday or Friday of last week. And then all of a sudden you start hearing that, oh well, now they re-interviewed Ozzie Guillen, and they're bringing in these other guys, and then now out of nowhere it kind of seemed like Griefel kind of got the last day or two, his name was floated out there, and then he got hired today, and then it immediately came out that they were keeping most of the coaches on staff. Like the pitching coach was already expected to be back. I believe the hitting coach was already supposed to be back, and I believe one other coach I saw, I could be wrong, was also expected to be retained. So what it kind of felt like to me was Espada wanted to come in and make a bunch of changes, and then the White Sox were like, well, and then it seems like they got somebody who would stay okay with keeping a lot of the current staff on hand. Or something, which it kind of leads into the point you're saying. I don't trust the White Sox to get this right. And if all of that stuff is true, then it really makes you question if he was the first choice, which it doesn't seem like he was, and what that kind of looks like with the staff, and if he's going to end up being a quicker fall guy if things don't go right there. There's a lot of questions around the hire of Griefel after the past kind of what's happened since like Thursday or Friday of last week already.
yeah, and you got to remember two other things in that he's been on staff for the Royals for a long time, so it's not like he was in other really good organizations and then went to Kansas City for a year for a promotion and then want to bring him on. Like he's been in that organization a long time, which has been a very it's been a very behind the curve, if I guess is the way to put it, organization. And then you're bringing him in to a place that seems to have been seems to currently be behind the curve when it comes to like modern baseball, analytics, modern baseball strategy, just and how the game is currently played. And then you kind of are talking about how you talk about Joe Espada and but the fact that they the Royals didn't retain this guy as their manager kind of is telling too. I mean, this guy was on the Royals staff, so they went outside hire for their guy, and you know that I thought it was interesting that the Royals didn't who know this guy as good as anybody didn't hire him, but the White Sox did. I thought was kind of an interesting thing too. But you know what? Until you give a guy a shot, you got to be fair to him. So we'll see what happens. It's not you never know how a certain guy might do in a certain role, and maybe he fits that franchise well. Who knows? But definitely felt better about the Royals hire than the White Sox hire.
Yeah, it just seemed a little weird with how everything happened the past like 4 or 5 days around that White Sox job. But got to give him a chance, and hopefully that for the White Sox sake that he's able to connect with that team better, and that bring keeping those coaches on, it helps the clubhouse some, because it seems like they're going to have some turnover in that roster anyways this offseason. But jumping over to the World Series, so we'll talk about really the two games that have happened so far. It really should have been Game 3, or been 3 games, but Game 3 ended up getting postponed to today due to rain. And actually, it's a 4-0 lead with the Phillies right now in the top of the third. But let's go ahead and start with Game 1. The Houston Astros jumped out to, it was a 5-0 lead on Aaron Nola in the first 2 innings. And it seemed like it was going to be all Houston. I mean, it was, no, they scored 2 in the second, 3 in the third, and they had Justin Verlander on the mound with a 5-0 lead. And Philadelphia came storming back, got 3 in the fourth, 2 in the fifth, and then ended up going to extra innings.
Yeah, so game one was pretty crazy. It was a great game. Like you said, the Astros jumped out real quick in that game. I think they scored like they hit three doubles in a row to start the game or something, but that might have been game two. They
That was
jumped
Game
out to a
2.
big lead. Okay, they jumped out in a big lead in both the first two games, but yeah, they really hit Nola and Wheeler in game two very well, and they got up to they got up 5-0, and the Phillies found a way to kind of scratch and claw their way back. Interesting note there: Justin Verlander pitched Game 1, and he is still winless in the World Series. I know we don't like wins as a stat, but out of the amount of times he's pitched in the World Series, it's kind of hard to believe he's never won a game. He also has an ERA north of 6 in the World Series, which is pretty interesting. Um, but the game got tied up. Then the bullpens both took over and did fantastic till to extra innings, where the JT Real Muto hit a very Minute Maid Park home run
Yeah.
that barely got over the right field wall on a line drive with a exit velocity under 100, which is pretty crazy. But then of course that ended up being the game winner. The Astros got a couple guys on in the bottom of the inning, and you had a weird play at the end where Aledmus Diaz kind of like obviously leaned into a pitch, and he kind of did it twice, but the first one still missed him, and then the second one he definitely leaned into, and I he got called out for that. I really did not understand why he was leaning into a pitch there, anyways, because there was second and third, which the winning run was on second for the Astros. So, like, does he just not want to be at the plate in a game-winning situation? He had to count in his favor. Like, just swing the bat, man. I don't get it. It's not like Jordan Alvarez or somebody was on deck. It was like Chas McCormick was on deck or something. So I did not understand why he would lean into a pitch there and try to get hit. It made zero sense to me, unless he just had zero confidence he was going to get a hit. But the Phillies ended up winning Game 1. Game 2, I think Wheeler got really knocked around, and the Phillies couldn't come back. The Framber Valdez is really, 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 really good. So 9 strikeouts, I believe, in Game 2. Only gave up 1 run. The Phillies, I think they added a run late in the game, but it ended up being a Astros win in Game 2. So the series 1-1, playing tonight right now. It is 4-0 in the third inning. So if anything we've seen this postseason, 4-0 is not an insurmountable lead, but the Phillies are obviously in the driver's seat right now. Um, and in game 3, and if they win that one, they would be leading 2-1 in the series. So
Yeah, it's been a really interesting World Series so far. In Game 1 too, it was came out during Game 2 that Martin Maldonado had used a bat that Albert Pujols had sent him that was technically outlawed, so he was actually using an illegal bat in Game 1, which I thought was pretty funny. But in Game 2, you mentioned Wheeler just didn't look like himself. It didn't even seem like he had the velocity there. Seemed like it was down a mile per hour or two. They just jumped all over him. And then there was a weird play. I want to say it was in the 8th inning. Well, not weird play, but Schwarber hit one that they called a homer, but then it was foul by like a couple feet actually. And then like the next pitch, he hit it right to the right field wall, and Kyle Tucker like took it out of the first row, which would have gave them. I think it was I think it would have made the game 5-3 at that time. So I think it was a 2-run. Would have been a 2-run homer. But that kind of seemed to take the Phillies were making a run there late. They got a run in the 7th. That would have gave them 2 in the 8th. They ended up getting 1 in the 9th. But it kind of seemed to take the wind out of their sails a little bit on the comeback attempt. But, mentioned Framber Valdez. I mean, he had 25 straight quality starts this year. I mean, he's a guy who they mentioned last year had 2 World Series appearances and couldn't get out of the third inning in either one, and gave up 5. And I believe one of them was 5 runs and the second one was 6 runs. Or they were both 5 runs. So a guy who had really struggled last year in the World Series or in the postseason, and then he's come back this year. It's been amazing, and then to step up into the World Series after you've already had your ace and Verlander struggle in Game 1, and he really put that staff on his back, and gave them 6 in the third, 4 hit, 1-run innings. I mean, that was a really big performance for them. And the Phillies, I mean, it's kind of been the same story. I mean, they're a hit or miss team. They need Nola and Wheeler to really carry them. They haven't. They've really struggled so far. Ranger Schwartz has pitched a really good game so far in Game 3, but we'll talk more about that on next week's episode. What I did find interesting, though, is that they are going to use Aaron Nola tomorrow night in Game 4. And then they said they'll depend on who's going to be the Game 5 starter after that, if it will be Noah Syndergaard or if they would go to Wheeler, I believe.
Yeah, that makes sense. If the if the Phillies are up 3-1 after tomorrow, then I would imagine that they would probably go to Syndergaard and get Wheeler an extra day of rest since he had a really little bit of a rough outing in game two, and like you said, his velocity might have been down a tick. And they might try to hope that that kind of helps him out. Now, if it's a 2-2 where that game five is really the game to win, that swing game, or if you're down 3-1, then in game five, then you have to go to Wheeler. You have to pitch your best guy. That's the biggest game of the year at that point. But if you go up 3-1, you have the luxury of probably throwing Syndergaard, and that way, when Wheeler does pitch, he's guaranteed to pitch in a closeout game. And if he does pitch, he's 100% because you don't want to throw Wheeler out there in game five if he's not 100%. And when you could have probably waited an extra day because I don't want to say game five would be a throwaway because I think you always in the postseason try to win every game, but it's not desperation elimination time or extremely important swing game time at that point. But I think that's interesting that how that might play out. I think that the rain out yesterday probably helps the Phillies because I think they were going to have to pitch Syndergaard yesterday and Suarez today, and I don't know how well that would have gone, but that kind of backed it up to where they could throw Nola and Wheeler again to kind of help get them ahead in this series. Going back, either win it in Philly or go back to Houston. So I think that really helps the Phillies that they had that rain out yesterday and they could get their guys back to where they could throw again before without having to use Syndergaard as a starter. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting. And of course, tonight, this game's obviously not over. So we could be sitting here tomorrow thinking something entirely different from what we're thinking about right now. So, uh,
Yeah, I mean, we just mentioned that the Astros had a 5-0 lead in the third inning of game one, and they ended up losing that game 6-5. And it's third inning, and it's 4-0 Phillies right now. So, I mean, that it's definitely not over. But part of me wonders if you're in that situation for as the Phillies in a 3-1, if you don't want to throw Wheeler at home, because I don't know if you've looked at Wheeler's home road splits this year, but it's pretty drastic. He is so far in 2022 at home in 78 innings. I mean, I know we don't love ERA, but he's a 185 ERA guy with a 188 batting average against and a 290 slugging. And if you go to the road in 75 innings, so really only a 3 inning gap, he's a 384 ERA guy, a 253 average, and a 412 slugging. So
yeah,
he
yeah. I
seems
was
to
gonna.
really be a lot better at home. So I wonder if you're in that game five, if you don't say, hey, let's first of all, let's just try and shut it down in Philadelphia, but also let's use the Wheeler start at home where he's been a lot better this season.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and I think if he had a good outing in game two, I would 100% believe that. You think the same way. It's just he didn't look like himself, and I feel like would game game four or game five would that be short rest too?
I don't think so
Would be
because it
regular. It'd
was
be regular
it was
rest,
Saturday, yeah. So it would have been regular rest because I believe it'd be what
right?
it'd be Thursday
Um,
now. It would have been
yeah,
Wednesday. So I mean that
yeah,
backing it up really does help him be on full rest for game
yeah,
five. I think if it was going to go regular, he would have been the game six starter had it got
right.
to there. Because it would have been the extra day of rest. But now it opens up that he could be on regular rest at home.
Right. Yeah, I would I would probably if on regular rest and I would probably try to throw him, but man, it's a tough decision just because I don't know how he's feeling. I don't know how what the deal was with game 2. Like if he wasn't feeling 100%, I definitely feel like you might give him that extra day. But if he was 100%, if he was just had a rough outing or his mechanics were a little off or he was tipping or something, they don't think it's going to happen again, then I think you 100% throw him in game 5. It's just hard to say honestly without, knowing the details of how he's feeling, but definitely I'm definitely on the side of, when you have a chance to close a team out, throw the guy who gives you the best chance to close them out on that day. Like I would not just save him because you can. Like I would save him if you feel. I would wait to pitch him if you feel like he's not 100%. You might, an extra day might make him pitch better. But I wouldn't. I would throw him as soon as you feel like he's ready. So
Yeah, makes sense. But looking at the schedule just for the rest of the World Series, obviously Game 3 is happening today on Tuesday the 1st. Game 4 will be Wednesday the 2nd. Game 5 will be Thursday the 3rd. Friday will be an off day. Game 6 will be Saturday the 5th. And then Game 7, if necessary, Game 6 and 7 or if necessary, will be on Sunday, November 6th. So no matter what, by the next time we record, we will have who's the winner of the World Series. So that's going to be really, really interesting, really fun. And then we'll jump into the off season episodes and get ready for all of what's about to be, what's about to be a wild and crazy off season. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Batflip Podcast. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.
thanks, guys.